There's some shred of truth in all of it. Yeah, I think any embellishments that were made were only to kind of enhance what was already true about it. So even the embellishments have some truth to them, I think. I was trying to write another song with my friend Todd that was going to be like this meta blues thing where all the lines were going to be like, I woke up this morning and I felt so bad I had to repeat myself. And I could never figure out where else to go with that. But then, I can't remember. I think I was just maybe stoned around the house or something, but I just thought, well, what about a song called 12 Bar Blues about 12 bars instead? And that song seemed to be a lot easier to write at the time, so as usual, I just went with whatever was easiest. Well, the whole thing isn't really about Hootie and the Blowfish, but Hootie and the Blowfish crept in there just because it was such a significant part of my childhood. There was a time in America where you couldn't really escape it. I think he was the late night musical guest on David Letterman every night for like a whole week or something like that at one point. But or that band was, I guess I shouldn't say he. But it just seemed to tie in with everything else, that I was talking about in the song. And, people will rag on bands like Hootie and the Blowfish sometimes, but, the truth is like, those bands meant a lot to some people, whether you think it's cool or not, it's kind of irrelevant. The music or the art or whatever did its job, because art is ultimately, at the end of the day, something that you can either love or hate, I think, in equal measure. And obviously they have done their job, and I like, I think sometimes people, I think that's an interesting sort of psychology, that psychology of having done something that's really commercially successful, and then at the same time be kind of this thing that, for whatever reason, people seem to want to make fun of. It's just a funny juxtaposition. I feel this, I feel the same way about, like you guys have that band Nickelback up there, it's kind of a, they're the band people love to hate, I guess, right? But at the end of the day, man, they're just a bunch of dudes trying to do a thing that to them is cool. So, if they, the only reason that I would ever be mad at Nickelback is if I found out that they thought it was a joke too. I guess it just comes from liking music, I mean, when I listened to like the Beatles or something like that, or the Stones even, the kind of seminal rock and roll bands that you get into at some point in your life if you like music. I was here, they never did one style on a whole record. It was always kind of all these different kinds of music, and what tied it together was their playing and their singing. So I just sort of approach my own stuff the same way. I mean, I always envisioned myself, in some kind of band ultimately, but it just kind of, the bands that I was in, for whatever reason, it wasn't the right kind of set of circumstances to make it work, you know, and so therefore I just kind of, you know, moved on to doing my own thing, but I never really lost that sort of idea of like, you know, what you did yesterday, you know, was hopefully executed, you know, into the highest level that you could execute it at the time. But ultimately, it's always for me more about, you know, what's coming tomorrow, what I'm going to try to do tomorrow. Socially, it's different because people, you know, just have different um, social values, I think, you know, in other parts of the world. And I think if you don't understand that, maybe sometimes it could even be a little like, you know, you might want to try to take it personally or something like that, you know, because they are more, sort of subdued sometimes, you know, particularly different than some of the audiences that I played for, like in the southern United States, for sure. But they're also incredibly respectful, you know. I mean, they'd be dead. You could hear a pin drop for your whole gig. So I would say, you know, overall it's not that much different. People just kind of react differently, and, you know, if you understand the culture behind the way that they are, it's you know, then it becomes incredibly similar, I think. Definitely Tim Hortons on the restaurant, no question. Especially now that they've got that pulled pork sandwich. Um, any Canadian musician, man, that's a tough one. That is a tough one. God, I don't know. You know, I mean, I suppose Leonard Cohen, I guess. Just, you know, I mean, that probably seems like an obvious one, but who in their right mind that's interested in being alive wouldn't want to hang out with Leonard Cohen for an afternoon? I would just talk to him about, you know, anything that would, you know, that would be on the table for him, you know, whatever he's reading, you know, how he wrote certain songs, definitely, you know, what sort of made him want to go do the Buddhism thing, you know, because I just think like the psyche and the kind of emotional roller coaster that goes along with being a performer sometimes is like, it's nice to have another perspective on it, because it is a very sort of solitary existence, you know, and you can find yourself like living in your head if you're not careful. I gotta say yes. Because I get where people would be coming from who would be naysayers to that. I totally understand it, and I am not rejecting their ideology in place of my own. But I think, you know, it's important to keep an open mind, particularly when it comes to your taste buds. I remember just hating, like, you know, stuff like Brussels sprouts and stuff like that when I was a kid, and now I love them. Like, if somebody brings them to dinner, I'm like over the moon. So I think, you know, it's you know, the question of you know, food taste is really more of a question of evolution. I actually never have, but that's not a bad idea.